Welcome to the Bible Forum. It is Sunday evening here in sunny Charleston, South Carolina. It is the last day of March. Tomorrow is April, and around here, that means spring. Temperatures in the mid to upper 70s, far as the eye can see. Don't want to upset you, but that's just the way it is. Y'all need to come down. I'm Warren Sprouse. We're here every Sunday night from 8 until 10 p.m. Eastern, looking at life through a biblical lens and trying to solve all the world's problems in 2 hours or less. Tonight I wanted to give you some information. If you are on the internet at all, you are using search engines. I like, well, can't think of the name of it off the top of my head now. I use a search engine that's not Google, and it's free, and it doesn't have a whole lot of stuff attached to it. I don't like getting a lot of feedback. But a fellow by the name of Stephen Andrew, who, and I can't remember his pedigree, but he is a Silicon Valley guy, has set out to create a new search engine. It's not ready yet. He's been collecting money, volunteers over the last several months, a year, whatever. He's very, very close, within a few $1,000s of what he assumed would be the cost of launching this. And it's called 1776free.com. Keep your eye open for something like that, something along that line. I think it might be worthwhile. He's also decided to use his technique, his leadership experience, and other skills to launch something he calls USA.life. This is something that is patterned after Facebook. He saw Facebook blocking millions of people from his own post. He's a conservative Christian kind of guy. And Facebook has just shut him down, apparently. He believes that Facebook lied to Congress about being a platform for all ideas, since clearly they are restricting people here all over. If you're a supporter of President Trump, if you're a Christian, if you're just a conservative, it's possible that they're going to come looking at you. He says that Facebook blocks 99% of this man's reach, which means 5 million people are missing every month from his account. He's led a multi-million-dollar initiatives for Cisco, Better Homes and Gardens, Sega, and Stanford. USA.life is necessary, he maintains, because of the censorship that affects elections, the censorship that affects people's lives and relationships. On his website, you'll be able to share photos, updates, news, video, and messages. He's also building a new search engine. He's calling all of this America's new search engine. He believes it'll provide better results than Google. And it's almost paid for. Check it out at 1776free.com. A new study claims to have found scientific evidence that brain differences between men and women begin in the womb. Some of us simply have a one-syllable comment. Duh. I think we've always known this sort of thing by observation, and of course there are exceptions. But he has found that male brains are more susceptible to environmental influences. This according to a study published in the journal Development Cognitive Neuroscience and also the Daily Mail over in London. Environmental influences, meaning we're driven by what we see, what we hear, what we feel, as opposed to basic responsibilities, I suppose. And again, I look at it and I think, duh. Brain scans of 118 fetuses in the second half of pregnancy were analyzed for links between gender and the connectivity of a developing brain. The differences are biological, and Professor Moriah Thomason of New York University is doing this research. One of the main differences, he says, was in connectivity issues across distant areas of the brain. The female brains are growing in utero, producing long-range networks, unlike apparently the male. This is something that he maintains is necessary for effective motherhood, for the raising of children, and for things relative to home. He found that this was less true among boys. I, for one, am glad they've done the research. Otherwise, we would never have known. James Dobson, founder of Focus on the Family, the James Dobson Family Institute, and author of dozens of books on the family, warns that Democrats the Democrats' proposed Equality Act is a really bad idea for the nation. Writing for the Dobson Institute, he says, quote, "Make no mistake, the so-called Equality Act is nothing but a thinly veiled attempt to finish off religious liberty in America once and for all, which ought to be plainly obvious based upon cursory reading of the First Amendment. The proposal, H.R. 5 and Senate Bill 788, would provide special protections for the LGBT community throughout American society, apparently across all platforms. It would state that religious beliefs are not a defense in the dispute between gay rights and constitutionally protected religious rights. I wish," he says, "I could say that I was shocked to see the speed with which Speaker Pelosi and House Democrats have brought to committee the sweet-sounding but entirely treacherous Equality Act. The decision demonstrates a frightening willingness by those on the left to advance a radical social agenda at a time when our nation already faces so many other divisive challenges. Simply put," he says, "by creating a protected class of citizens out of the LGBT community, this bill is placing Christians who believe in traditional marriage at a grave legal and civil jeopardy." Now keep in mind, when considering just who is driving the social bus, can you really be surprised at anything you see or hear relative to these kinds of issues? In order to get attention, the attention that can thrust people into the limelight, people need to find more exotic issues to put forward. I would suggest to you, don't be surprised at what pops up next. And oh, by the way, the Bible predicts this sort of thing, telling us that all that will live godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution. But evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. But continue thou in the things which thou hast learned, and hast been assured of, knowing of whom thou hast learned them, and that from a child thou hast known the holy scriptures, which are able to make thee wise unto salvation through faith which is in Christ Jesus. The Apostle Paul, writing to Timothy in his second epistle, chapter 3, verses 12 through 15. In other news, we find a judge in Wisconsin who has ruled against a town's effort to impose what it calls sexual orthodoxy on churches. The town did this through a non-discrimination ordinance that declares all places of worship public accommodations. Brown County Circuit Court Judge William Atkinson issued a verbal order in December concluding the ordinance passed by the Des Peres City Council barring discrimination based on gender identity infringes on the religious freedom of local churches. He called it in his document an egregious free speech violation, and it is that. He goes on to say the viewpoint discrimination in the ordinance is straightforward. Churches and religious entities may speak, they may advertise, and otherwise publish their religious beliefs, including expectations of members, attendees, and employees, and use of the facilities and services provided, so long as those beliefs are in agreement with the city's sexual orthodoxy. Apparently, the city ordinance does not feature nor condone what has always been considered aberrant sexual behaviors, at least not yet. Stay tuned. It seems in California, girls as young as 10 years of age are among over 200,000 children who were allowed to legally wed adults in the last 15 years. That according to new data uncovered by a Bay Area legislator. The legislator's name is Hill, and he was shocked when he learned from a young constituent that while Californians cannot legally consent to sex until they're 18, they can, with permission of a parent and or a judge's order, get married at any age, even if their spouse is many years older. Did you hear what I just said? Any age. Hill's resulting proposal to bar juveniles from getting hitched has been watered down after it prompted strong objections from civil rights groups, including the American Civil Liberties Union. Have you noticed what constitutes civil liberties over the last 10 years or so? It's an amazing thing. Apparently the state doesn't keep statistics on how many young people are marrying, and even efforts to change that are running into resistance there in California. Just in the past year, elected officials in several states have pushed to restrict juvenile marriages. New York passed a law last month to allow 16 and 17-year-olds who have become legal adults emancipated from their parents to marry. While in Texas, they are holding the line at age 17 with a judge's permission. Mr. Hill wanted California to set a strict age limit at 18, but the effort encountered swift opposition from fellow legislators, as well as groups that included the ACLU and Planned Parenthood. While the legislation is still alive and moving through legislative committees, amendments have removed any age restriction. The measure in its current form increases family court oversight to ensure that a minor's marriage isn't coerced, including a requirement that judges interview individuals privately. Activists aiming to stop such marriages say they occur across demographic lines, spurred by religious reasons, cultural norms, pregnancies, financial incentives, or in some cases, to protect someone from statutory rape accusations because marriage circumvents the age of consent requirement. Nationally, about 5 of every 1,000 children ages 15 to 17 were married in this country as of 2014. That according to U.S. Census data analyzed by the Pew Research Center, figures that don't specify where the marriages occurred. Activists for age restrictions estimate that California sees about 3,000 marriages every year that include a minor. The ACLU and other opponents say that estimate is inflated, noting that just 44 petitions for juvenile marriage were filed in the Los Angeles County, which has a population just north of $10 million, and that in the last 5 years. You probably already know by now, unless you've just isolated yourself in the last few days, but the Pentagon has notified Congress that it authorized the payment, the transfer, I should say, of up to $1 billion to erect 57 miles of pedestrian fencing along the U.S.-Mexico border in direct support of President Trump's national emergency declaration last month. The fencing, which will be 18 feet high, is to be erected in the Yuma and El Paso sectors. A reporter from the New York Times tweeted that this is the first time the funds will be transferred under Section 284 for the border wall. Section 284 allows Pentagon to construct roads and fences and to install lighting to block drug smuggling corridors across international boundaries of the United States in support of counter-narcotic activities of federal law enforcement agencies. Why do we need a wall? The same reason you believe you need a lock on your door. You did notice that we've got something in the neighborhood of 10,000 people have come across the border just in recent months. And now our government agents down there are turning many of these people loose to go wherever they want to go. And they're doing that because they have run out of room in which to house them. And if they do not house them in places that are acceptable to the liberal bunch in this country, they will sue and get these people released and who knows what else. This is a mess. And not one of these people would invite any of these people coming across the border into their homes. If they would, they probably would have already done it. But you know how it is. The more wealth people have, the more station people have in this world, the more likely they are to live in a gated community. Our own former president lives in the Chicago area with a wall around his house. But they won't let us put up a wall around our house. Isn't that amazing? Welcome to America.